Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Working in Hockey. I'm your host, Nick Bowins, and today I'm joined by a very special guest, a floorball teammate and champion, Mr. Steve Dangle Glynn. How are you, my friend?
Ooh, I'm great, man. Representing McFlurry Power. I've been riding the high of becoming a champion, completely riding the coattails of tournament MVP Nick Bowins. So
Appreciate the kind words, but in this situation or scenario here, working in hockey, you, my friend, are the expert, not me. So, gonna dive into your career a little bit here, all the different stops along the way, everything that you guys are doing with SDPN nowadays. But first, I want to hit you with a bit of a hard hitter here. I spoke with Pavel Barber the other day for one of these interviews, and you always kind of hear in showbiz, oh, that guy's got a name for TV or movies. There's something to having a star-powered name. How did you, my friend, land on Dangle, Steve Dangle Glynn?
total fluke. Dangle obviously is a hockey term, but that wasn't originally what it was supposed to be. No, it wasn't sexual. It was. I was on the high school. I wrote for the high school newspaper at Sir Oliver Mowat when I was there, and like all the really cool people do. And for some reason, it was a tradition to give yourself a silly nickname. And someone, Diana Bailey, she's now a comedian in Texas. She was on the newspaper with us, and she brought in a list of ridiculous names from a book. I forget the name of the book, and Floyd Dangle was one of them, and I thought it was so funny. So I was Steve Floyd Dangle Glynn. And when I made my YouTube account, I didn't want it to be my real name, so I was like, oh, okay, I'll make it Steve Dangle. And then it was months after I made my channel that I started talking about hockey.
Yeah.
And then people started watching it, and I didn't even remember my username. So I was like, oh no, I hope it's not my real name. I should change it. And I saw it was Steve Dangle, and I went, oh, well, that's perfect. And now it's my name. So,
That's amazing. That's amazing. It always seems like the best things are just stumbled into, eh?
yep, 100%
100%.
pure fluke.
Awesome. Well, take me back to those early high school days. A young Steve, growing up, diehard Leafs fan. We'll get to the LFRs, the book, and everything as we go here. But where did the love for hockey kind of come from? When did you decide, hey, you know what? I want to be a part of this. This is going to be my career path. Getting into the game of hockey here.
Well, it's interesting, right? One of the things I talked about in my book at length, and I know I'm going to lose a lot of people here, but I never played, right? I never played growing up. And my parents took me to skating lessons. I want to say it was 4 or 5. And I liked them. I enjoyed them. I always liked hockey. I grew up in Scarborough, and at the time, Scarborough was its own city. It wasn't part of Toronto. So I remember asking my dad, I was like, why are the Leafs our team? And he said, because they are. Like, we're basically in Toronto. We're just outside. They're our team. And I went, okay, that's enough for me, Dad. One of my earliest memories is the 93 playoff run. I was only 5 years old,
Yeah.
taking on Gretzky. And I remember having this huge conflict but they're the Leafs are the best team in the world, and they're taking on Gretzky, who's the best player in the world. So like, how is that going to work? Like, that's, how you think when you're 5. But, part of the reason, I don't like to make excuses, but part of the reason I never played hockey, or my parents never got me into hockey, is it wasn't practical. It wasn't necessarily a money thing, although money was extremely tight. My sister was born at 24 weeks. Full term is between 37 and 40. At the time, she was one of the most premature births in Canadian history. I think the record is 20. That she grew up with a lot of disabilities, and that took up a lot of time in our house growing up. And so that's why I never played. And then around age 9 or 10, they said, hey, if you really want to get into hockey, we can get you into hockey. And I was thinking about it like a kid. I didn't want to get made fun of. I didn't want to be bad at it. And I knew I wasn't going to be playing with any of my friends, because all my friends were really good at hockey. And a lot of them played rep. Growing up in my neighborhood, there was Rob Quitt, who played on the Windsor Spitfires. He was Ryan Ellis's defense partner when they were
Wow.
winning Memorial Cups. There was Wayne Simmons, who went to the middle school down the street. It was a good hockey neighborhood
Yeah.
full of good hockey players. I don't even know who I was going to be playing against. So it was something that I didn't really pick up until I was 29.
Wow.
But always loved hockey, always loved yapping. So I did want to get into journalism,
Hmm.
and I was always a huge sports fan, but I never thought I'd be able to connect the two things because I never played. And it wasn't until I made this YouTube channel just yelling and screaming about the Leafs as an outlet. As soon as that started taking off, I'm like, well, okay, wait a sec. Maybe there's something I could do here.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I'm glad that you touched on your sister there. I think that that's an important part of your journey and ties into a lot of what you guys are doing today with Easter seals and everything else that you support and spend time on is always awesome to see online. But yeah, who cares if you didn't play? Like I always say, like just
A
because
lot
I
of people
eat,
do.
it's
A lot of
crazy,
people
but
do.
like just because I eat doesn't mean I can be a chef. So just because I didn't play doesn't mean I can't coach. Like, it's not apples to oranges there, but the
Yeah.
the gatekeeping around playing hockey is bananas. It's unlike any other sport. And I for one, as a fan of yours, I'm glad that you stuck through that there. What was your first role in hockey then? Was it the YouTube channel? Was it something in journalism coming out of Ryerson? How'd you get your foot in the door initially?
Yeah, that's difficult to measure. So the whole reason I started the YouTube channel was basically when I was in my first year at Ryerson for radio and television arts.
Mm.
Most of the people around me had an internship, and I didn't. So it was like a self-appointed internship, and it wasn't until deep into my second year at Ryerson that I got an actual internship at Sportsnet 590 The Fan.
Cool.
I think it was just called the Fan 590 back then. So it was sort of that. The first paid gig I ever had, $75 a week. It was out of the same studios at Sportsnet, um, where I was an intern, but it was for a show called RBC Junior Hockey Magazine, and the host was Gino Retta. So every week I would have to sneak Gino Retta, um, through the doors in the garage, and he would come in after recording That's Hockey
Oh,
at TSN. He would drive down and he would read the script that I provided him. Very often that script sucked, and he was a pretty hard teacher, but it was something I needed. And it just so happened that year of junior hockey was bloody magical. And I got to talk to some stars. Like one of the stories we covered that winter, because it was the 2009 World Juniors, was Jordan
mm,
Eberle's
yeah.
goal against Russia, Canada making it 5 straight against Sweden. So we interviewed Jordan Eberle a lot. I think we got Taylor Hall, even though he wasn't drafted until the next year. We got John Tavares. We got Braden Shen. I
Hmm.
don't remember if we got Luke. Tyler Myers. Tons and tons of guys. I tried to get Victor Hedman, but I wasn't as good at getting teams to return my phone calls from Europe as I was in major junior. So that was my first job. $75 a week, writing scripts for Gino Retta. Mean
Hey.
Gene.
That's a pretty cool gig, though. That's a pretty cool gig. I guess moving on up from there, what other kind of internships, opportunities, early kind of entry level gigs did you have around the sport there? As any good host, I looked at your LinkedIn about 10 minutes before our interview, and I think
Yeah.
there's too many for me to list.
Oh man, it's now at the point where there's too many for me to remember all of them. I needed an internship in my final year at Ryerson, and I got into Leafs TV. It was a paid internship. I got $300 a month, which was
Nice.
$300 more per month than most of the other kids I went to school with were getting. So I was pretty fortunate in that regard, and I was able to turn that into a job in the next year, and I made somewhere under 15 grand. And one day, I don't know why I did this, but I tried to figure out how much I made per hour,
Mm,
because it was just X amount per month. I can't remember what it was. It was like $5
yeah.
or something like that. And this is for, Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. But the thing I did through the lion's share of getting out of school was editing highlights, writing scripts for highlight packs, editing highlight packs, gathering clips for highlight packs, stuff like that. And that went on for years and years. And I think I got pretty good at it. And it would have been something that I honestly would have been happy to do for the rest of my life. Um, I don't know about the hours, especially now that I have two kids, getting home at 3 a.m. or whatever. But
Yeah.
um, all the while I was doing all that stuff, I was also doing LFR and growing
Yeah.
my YouTube channel. And very late in that process, the podcast came to fruition in at the end of May 2013.
Yeah.
Um, just after the Leafs
Right
blew it
after the
against the
series.
Bruins. Yeah, and and then the Bruins blew it against the Blackhawks. So
Yes. Yes.
that was a pretty pleasurable 17 seconds
Yep.
for me in there. But I mean, I worked for Nike. They sent me to the Olympics. They sent me to the World
Mm.
Juniors to talk to people, to talk to athletes about like nutrition and stuff. And like, look at me. Like I like chocolate. I like chips. I like I like a beer. I was never really anything you could call an athlete. I did highlights for the KHL, which was an eye-opening experience, and I learned a lot about hockey, and a lot about not getting paid for like 6 months. um, so it's been quite the journey, and then finally some stability hit my life when Sportsnet hired me in September 2014, and I worked there for 9 years.
Awesome, awesome. There's so many things that I could dive into there. You touched on the LFR kind of starting up after that famous series against Boston. Talk to me a little bit about the early days of that. Was that you editing, cutting everything yourself after filming it? I think that's kind of an overlooked part of the creator journey a lot of times. And when did it first sort of pick up steam on the LFR side of things?
Well, so LFR, the Leaf fan reaction videos after every single game, I edited every single one of those videos for 14 years.
No shit.
Between 2007 and whatever 3 years ago was.
Wow.
Producer Drew Livingstone, who was at Sportsnet, he started editing them a few years ago, and thank God for that. Um, just what a load off. But in terms of like really necessary and valuable skill sets, you got to edit. The days of doing one thing, I mean, you still can, it's possible, but it's really difficult. It took me a very long time to get to the point where I was doing just one thing, hosting, and that's it. You got to know how to edit audio, which I'm still not very good at. You got to know
Me
how
either.
to edit video. Yeah, I'm a little bit better at video than audio, which is sort of back asswards. And then the podcast, I was very fortunate where I could just host. Um, and by host, I mean just yap, because Adam Wild was the host. He would drive the bus. And then our original producer, Chris Shapcott, did all the editing and everything. And then Jesse Blake joined a little over a year later. So, if Adam was the steering wheel, I was the gas pedal,
Yeah.
where, I just went nuts when appropriate and kept it calm. It's amazing, and I mean my fault that I'm just known as yelly screamy guy, because it's really not what I do that high a percentage of the time,
No.
but it definitely leads to the most memorable moments, which I don't begrudge that at all. You can't yell and scream into a microphone and camera and be surprised when people react to it, right? So I don't begrudge that at all.
Hey, whatever works, and it sure works. Yeah, I think absolutely on your point about audio, video being a jack of all trades. Like Nick Robertson, we can't just have you scoring goals. You got to bring something else to the table, right? It's very hard to just be an on-camera creator and get far these days. You got to have cool edits. You got to be posting everywhere. Like kind of full spectrum approach is what works nowadays because it is so
Mhm.
saturated across sports in particular, right? You touched on Sportsnet there. You were there for 8, 9 years. Like, talk to me about that role, how it evolved, how you learned through that role. Because being at Sportsnet, like, you're around some of the best in the business, learning from them, soaking it in a pretty cool environment, I'd imagine.
Oh, it was a really cool environment. And, it's something that, again, I never thought was going to happen. It's amazing how many things in my career, and maybe you can take some comfort from this, any person who's listening to this, young in the business, you feel like it's never going to happen to you. The amount of things that I thought was never going to happen to me that happened,
Yeah,
I can't even remember them all. Um, Again, never worked, uh, or never. I did work in hockey. I worked outside of hockey, right? The peripheries, doing the highlights and stuff. It's not like I
sure.
was a coach or anything. But when Sportsnet and Rogers bought the NHL rights, the news was announced while I was at CBC,
Okay.
and it was dark. Like, it was bleak. And Elliot Friedman has talked about this before because he was in a similar position to me where he didn't work for Rogers at the time. And everyone in that building was like, oh, we're going to lose our job. And one of my first bosses at Sportsnet, a guy named Dan Tavares, he was also my boss at CBC, but I was so many rungs beneath him that, like, I didn't think he even knew who I was. And someone who I worked with, who I do like, but they had a flair for the dramatic, gave me the impression Dan didn't like me. And then Dan got hired to Sportsnet, and I was crushed. Like, I saw the news, I was like, oh man, this means, like, that dream is over, right?
Yeah.
So if I get laid off from CBC, I'm screwed. And then I did, right? Along comes Dave Cadeau, who, when I was an intern at Sportsnet, he was like a mid-morning producer. Fast forward 6 years later, he was the assistant program director.
Okay.
And he goes, for many years he tried to get me in, and he goes, I think I finally got it. And the whole thing was Rogers owned 1 billion radio stations across the
Yeah.
country. And the vast majority of them don't talk about sports, and a lot of their hosts had no idea what was going on with hockey. So I had to come up with this behind the scenes prep sheet, where I would find stories that everyone could talk about. It's not just like, oh, so and so had 2 goals last night. Like, that's boring to most non hockey fans. But a story like Mike Green of the Washington Capitals, he used a stick, a specific
Yes.
type of Easton. I forget the exact type of Easton, but it was an Easton stick. And he scored like 30 goals with it one year. They stopped manufacturing it. And then there was this article written about, how he misses that stick, and sticks that he had given away to fans, signed items of memorabilia, were given back to him by fans. He used them during NHL games, and he put up NHL points with these sticks that fans gave him,
Yeah.
which I think is an incredible story. So I did that. A few months in, I guess Dan Tavares must have been checking his email, and he went, Steve Dangle works here? And they go, yeah. He goes, is he making videos for us? And they go, no. And he goes, well, that's stupid. Let's get him making videos. So it turned out he didn't dislike me at all.
Huh.
And, he got me making videos. And the next year, the prep sheet went away. But I was making videos full time. So it wasn't until about a decade into making videos that making videos was my only job, or
Oh,
making content was my only job, because I was doing some writing as well.
okay.
Took a long time.
Yeah, no, it always does. It always does. It's an uphill battle for sure. And all the while you're doing Steve Dangle podcast with Adam and Jesse as well, right?
Oh yeah, from 2013 onward, and I was pretty fortunate. I think a lot of when you get hired full time at these places, they kind of want to own everything that you do.
Yeah.
And I was never full time at Sportsnet. I was always
Mm,
contract, and they never gave me too hard of a time about my YouTube channel or the podcast YouTube channel because they were things that pre-existed my employment there. Not every company would do that. Some companies would be like, well, that doesn't benefit us, so who cares? They, I think, at very least had the foresight to be like, well, Steve's star rising is good for us.
Yes.
So they didn't prevent the podcast from growing. They didn't prevent my channel from growing. And, lo and behold, I did pretty well for them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't know all the official numbers. I know what I racked up in terms of viewership for them, but I also have some idea of the money I brought in for them. Like, I was not a loss leader, and it was incredible to me. It's still incredible to me how in 2024 you really got to bash your head against the wall trying to get some of these companies to buy into digital. And I don't know how to, in a non-cocky way, be like, I am money. My show is, my company is going to be the best day of your career when you sign us. And you got to go in with that attitude, right? And it's still an uphill battle. That every year we're making ground. Every year
Yep.
we're making ground. Some years you make up more ground than others. But it's still a surprising slog.
It's a lot trickier than a lot of people think, right? They see the success of a show like yours or a page like Hockey Collective and they think, oh, it's easy. You just go approach a company, you sell an ad, boom, easy convincing. It is not. The digital landscape is very tricky these days. The ad spend is very tricky these days, which, it affects us all. But I think that kind of transitions well on the digital side to SDPN. Everything that you guys have built. Talk to me about the idea. I'm sure it was formulating for a long time to make this full time for you guys. Talk to me about the transition from Rogers Sportsnet to SDPN full time for you guys.
Right. So we launched SDPN. I think officially 2021. I think it's difficult. The COVID era, just I just can't remember dates of anything, and I have a really good long term memory. Um, I think 2020 we had a lot of time to ourselves and a lot of time to think, and that's when the idea of a network of podcasts sort of came up. We eventually launched it. We eventually grew. We did really well. We have an office space, um, and you hit snags along the way. And we never wanted to be the company that grew too quickly and had to lay people off. I can't get into all the specifics. That is what happened. You look back at things you would have done differently, and sometimes things are beyond your control, and it's almost more frustrating to have things happen that way than just look back and go, oh, I made a mistake and I'm never going to make that mistake again. That doesn't mean we're flawless, but it was upsetting. But we did for quite some time employ a lot of people, give a lot of people their first chance in the industry. That was devastating to not have that anymore. We still have a number of shows. We still employ a number of people. Employing people, giving people an opportunity is one of the greatest joys I've had professionally.
Yep.
And it's something that I want to do more and more and more and more of. I know what it's like to not have a lot of money. And then I know what it's like to have a little bit of a cash flow injection. I don't need to be a millionaire. If I can sacrifice a little bit to give more people an opportunity to make the content better, to make more of it, I'll absolutely do that. And the mantra of SDPN is sports are fun. So we try to take that thought process into everything. The CJ show is an insider show based in fun.
Yeah.
Agent Provocateur is a really informative show with an agent, Alan Walsh, from within the NHL, but it's based in fun. The Basu Godin Notebook, focusing on the Habs, is an insider show made for Habs fans and based in fun. Nailing the Apex is a Formula One show based in fun, and we've had like Daniel Ricciardo on the show. Like
Yeah.
we've had Gunther Steiner. Like we've had some incredible names. Drew and Stu is nothing but fun. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's a betting slant to it. It's
Yep.
mostly a football show. Obviously, football is in their off season right now, and they're still making content on other stuff. Um, but just every show we have
Yeah.
is based in having fun, and we never take ourselves too seriously, even though we're not afraid to touch on serious topics. It's all about fun.
100%. I think that's the way to do it. And, as a fan, as a consumer, I love everything you guys are doing. From a business standpoint, I love everything you guys are doing. And as a friend, it's awesome to see the success that you guys have had. Like you said, you've got a great crew of people there. And that's what the core of any good business is, right? Good people coming together, making things fun. That is awesome. That is what SDPN is. We always wrap things up here, Steve, with a little rapid fire, kind of on some advice, your journey through hockey. Sound good?
Let's go.
Perfect. Singular person who has helped you the most in your career.
Ooh. Um I mean, pretty hard not to say Adam Wilde. We went to high school together. He's the one who convinced me to start a podcast in
Mhm.
the first place, and subsequently the network. But if we're going to focus on people who aren't business partners, um I'm going to say, in terms of growth, Mike Cormack. He, I believe, is now with the Toronto Star. He's changed jobs a few times. He was with the Athletic, but he at Sportsnet made me a way better content creator, way better writer. You know, I don't think I'd be an author without him.
Yeah,
And just a really kind, excellent man to work with.
awesome. Awesome. Favorite piece of content you've ever created?
Ooh, favorite piece of content I've ever created. Really enjoyed some of the stuff I've done at NHL Media Day with NHL Stars, Leafs Media Day with Leaf
Hmm.
Stars. Um, some of the stuff I did with Nike back in the day was still really cool, but I don't want to say something from 14 years ago was my favorite piece of content. Honestly, the live shows
Yeah.
that we do, all the stuff that we did, um, All Star Weekend
Mhm.
at the Rec Room, but something about having a live crowd of people around me as we filmed an LFR live in Stockholm, Sweden. It just feels like an experience that it was a real full circle thing. I never thought I would travel to Europe and have a few dozen people hanging out and applauding what I was shooting live.
It's hard to argue with that answer. Childhood heroes, current players, anybody in media, who's the coolest person you've met through working in hockey?
Ooh, I really enjoyed meeting Peter Mansbridge.
Mm.
That was cool, and I think he watches some of my stuff, and he told me there's a magic to what you do. He told me that,
Wow.
and Jason York, who played in the NHL, was my
Mhm.
one of my co-hosts, and he was on set. And if you watch the broadcast of Peter Mansbridge telling me that, you can hear Yorkie under his breath go, "Oh my god," which because he understood the gravity of Peter Mansbridge telling me that. Childhood idol, Felix Potvin through and through all the way. Everyone loved Dave Anderchuk, Doug Gilmore, Wendell
Yeah,
Clark. I loved all those guys, but Felix the Cat was my guy.
that's awesome.
Um, and I mean, I know Sportsnet gets a really bad rap, and a lot of the people there get a really hard time. Really good people work there, man.
Yeah.
Elliot Friedman was so supportive. Um, there are few people better to watch a hockey game with than Dave Amber. I gotta say, this is just a really good crew. I'll stop listing names so that I don't list them all.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. Two more here. Best piece of advice you've gotten in your career?
You don't get rich writing books.
Fair.
No, I was told that. Best piece of advice. I mean, this wasn't from my career. It was from Dragon Boat in high school. It was keep your head in your own boat. But it's something that I applied to my career. So in running, if you look into other lanes, it slows you down.
Yep.
In boat racing, if you look in, to the left and the right of you, it's going to screw up your form and you'll go slower. It'll slow you down. One thing I did when I was much younger in this business, and I see people do it all the time, is they look at other people and they go, why not me? And I'm not telling you to not have a competitive fire to you. I'm just saying, focus on you. The being jealous, being angry, is not going to propel you forward. Focusing on you and improving the things you do is what's going to do that.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. My last question was going to be, what advice would you give somebody? But I don't want to force you to outdo that last answer, so we'll end it right there. Steve, tell the people where they can find you.
For that, I would just say get a versatile skill set and learn to edit and learn to write. Too many kids I went to school with wanted no part in writing. They just wanted to film pretty things, and those pretty things have a story. Is all I would say. The story is paramount. Always remember your audience. Where can you find me? SDPN YouTube channel, SDPN on Apple Podcast, SDPN on Spotify, Steve Dangle YouTube channel, all of that. You can find me on Twitter too. I don't know if anyone really uses that anymore. Steve Dangle, all one word, on Instagram. I think it's the same on TikTok. And you could also find me winning a floorball championship in Floorball 2, Game 11, with one Nick Bowins between the legs.
It's
1-0 victory.
It's true. That's a badge I'll have to wear for the rest of my life, unfortunately. But no, Steve, I can't thank you enough for coming on here, man. I think you've got a great story. It's awesome what you guys are doing at SDPN. For me as a Leafs fan, it's cool to talk to you in the Blue Room. Guys, stay tuned for next week's episode of Working in Hockey.